Okay, so normally during this section, if you come to the meeting on a regular basis, this is me interviewing a, not necessarily a stranger, but a person that, I don't know. Essentially today is basically going to be like when Todd and I used to do the radio show, because like I said earlier, I really don't trust anybody else to talk about finance. They're full of shit.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
He's like, well, thank you.
One of the nicest things anybody's ever said about me.
I happen to have a finance license. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I am licensed.
So in my usual fashion, I don't have notes. I don't have canned questions. And usually Todd's sitting on the opposite side of me when we're at the radio station. And he goes, well, Steven, what do you think about real estate finance? And he lets me talk for 45 minutes. And he's like, that was a nice show. Have a nice day, folks.
Yep. It's easy.
But actually, my hope for tonight, if you're brand new and you don't understand how to finance a real estate transaction at all, you sort of hear a light version of every variation of it. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So I want to actually go, since everybody always does like the origin story stuff when I talk to them, we should talk about designing the first loan program with Jeff and like why the underwriting criteria came up the way it was.
All right. So a while back, I used to work with I was flipping property, and I had some rental properties going, and I met a guy. Actually, I was working on a triplex out in Moreno Valley, and when I was doing this triplex, my contractor underestimated the budget, first of all. So when he came back with a higher budget later on, I realized I didn't have enough money, and the hard money lender I was working with at that time wasn't willing to extend me an additional line of credit to finish the rehab. So I'm out of money practically on this thing, and I had put every bit of money I had into all the projects I had at that time. So I ended up going out there on my first ever capital raise. I didn't realize that's what it was at the time. And all it really took was me like asking one person I knew who was my corporation registered agent. I asked him, hey, do you know anybody who lends money in real estate? He said, yeah, call this guy Jeff. So I called this guy Jeff. He said, come down to my office, and we talked about the deal. We went out to Moreno Valley and looked at this house. We walked it. He had a construction background, so he knew a lot about what we were going through. And he said, yeah, it looks like your budget's now right on track. Like, it looks like you can finish this. And so we went over the numbers and everything and how he was going to get paid. And he essentially was like, great, I'll do the deal. So he took out my existing financing, and then he lent me some money on this deal to finish it. And then we took him out with traditional financing afterwards, and we kept it as a rental for a few years after that, and sold it in 2014 is actually when we sold that one. But my relationship with Jeff continued. We actually did some more deals together, some flips, and then one day he went to a seminar out in Vegas called the Pitbull Mortgage School. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this, put on by a guy named Leonard Rosen. And truth be told, the information's good at that seminar, but they try to sell you on like an additional thing you don't really need. So, but the information was good. So Jeff went out to this thing, and he comes back. He tells me all about it. He says, I think I want to be a hard money lender. And I'm like, hard money lender, okay, like, that's kind of boring, isn't it? Like, who wants to be a lender? And so he's like, I just think it would be easy. I think the deals will come to us, if we have money putting out there. So I'm like, okay, it sounds fine. Let's look into it. So I kind of dug my nose into every regulation book, as I tend to do. Like, when I want to get into something new, I just immersed myself in lending. So I read like every regulatory piece on lending in California and found out about Dodd-Frank and RESPA and TILA and all these wonderful regulations that exist now that didn't exist prior to the crash, in their current forms anyway. And I found out that being a real estate broker, like a BRE broker, is not actually the best way to be a lender in California anymore. It turned out that the best way to do it was through a California finance lender license. So I told him this. I said, this seems solid to me, and he ran it through his attorney. And his attorney had never heard of a California finance lender before, along with a lot of other people I talked to at that time.
I forgot about that.
And we just went that route. We ended up going through the licensing process to get him and his company, Macmillan Capital, licensed as a California finance lender, which they still are today. But when we first kind of talked about how we were going to put together programs, everybody had their lending programs out there. You go to any hard money lender that existed in California at that time, which there were 82 of them. They all had their programs, and they were very similar. They were 65% ARV with 2 to 4 points, and their interest rate was anywhere from 12 to like 16%. That was a pretty common thing.
But let's do the explanation of what that means. So what is 65% points?
Okay, so 65% of an after repair value would be they're going to lend you 65% of what the property is going to be worth once you're done with the renovations. Some people call it an as improved value, like an appraiser would call it that. So yeah, you do 65% of that is what your loan will be. Most of the time, they're going to hold back a construction holdback or a
Fund control.
fund control. There you go. That's the word. So
We don't like those. That's why.
yeah, nobody likes fund controls. Fund controls are difficult because lenders often don't have experience in construction. And I know contractors and the way these fund controls get dispersed to contractors, there's always a lot of argument on how much work was actually completed, how much of the draw is actually supposed to go to the contractor. It's definitely a big point of contention between the lenders and the contractors and the borrowers. So, we had these typical programs out there. The 2 to 4 points thing, that would be like if you're borrowing $100,000 and you're paying 4 points, that's going to be $4,000 added on top of your mortgage payment each month that you'd have to make on this property. So, and if you're borrowing at, let's just say 12% of $100,000, that's $1,000 a month you have to pay to this mortgage in addition to the $4,000 up front. So month one, you're already in $5,000 in payments that you've already had to pay. So, and then a lot of these lenders would throw in these these junk fees. In fact, they talked about it at that mortgage school that in Vegas where we learned how to become lenders. They talked about adding in junk fees, and that's how you make your real money, And some of these people would throw in anywhere up to $3,000 on the front side. And then on the back side, you didn't even know this existed, but then they'd throw it in again for admin fee and payoff demand fee.
It'd be in a document, right? Like buried, like
Yeah.
in your loan docs.
Yeah, I remember one. I paid like just over $3,000 on a payoff. It's like sticker shock. You didn't expect to have to pay this going into a deal, but then you see it and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I actually am going to be paying this right now. So. When I talked to Jeff about the initial loan program we could do, there was 2 ways we could go. We could either compete on price or we could compete on leverage. Competing on price would mean we're going to charge less for the money. So instead of charging 2 to 4 points, we're going to charge 1.5 to 3 points or something like that. And instead of charging 12 to 16%, we're going to charge 10 to 15% or something like that. So that's competing on price. That's hard to do because we were small, and Jeff honestly wanted to make a little bit more of a return than that. So we had to compete on leverage. When you compete on leverage, you can increase your price, actually. So
Explain leverage.
okay, so leverage would be rather than 65% of the loan of the property value, you're going to loan. In our case, we lent up to 76% of the property value, and the only reason it went to 76 is because it started at 75. And then somebody told me that he knew somebody already doing 75%. So I said, well, then we do 76%. So, because I wanted to be the highest leveraged lender in Southern California. And we were. Macmillan Capital had the highest leveraged loan product available at that time. And I changed it up because it was just me. I was the only one that was going to be running this business. I was the only one going to be doing anything. And I didn't want to have to deal with servicing where people would have to make monthly payments. Plus, as a flipper, I hated making monthly payments. So I created this program where there would be no payments. You just pay a big fee up front, essentially. So if you wanted to borrow $100,000, I would charge a 7% fee, a 7-point fee to borrow the money. So instead of giving you $100,000, you paying me back money over time, I just gave you $93,000 at the start. But all your interest was based upon the $100,000. It was kind of it was a very different way of doing it. Nobody ever heard of this.
It's just prepaid payments, essentially, right?
Yeah, you're prepaying payments.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, 4 points at that time would be, let's say $4,000. And then if you're paying 1% each month, which is a 12% rate, you're paying 3 months worth of payments. So that would be 7%. So I figured if you can get your flips done in 3 months, then you're already going to be paying 7% anyway. So we just took it off the top right up front. And you didn't have to come out of pocket for it. It came out of our pocket going into the deal.
I mean, the truth is, everybody's paying you back with your own money anyway.
Yeah.
Like, so if you borrow hard money, and like Todd and I, every time we've talked to like a lender and they've talked to us about leverage, we have the same argument. It's essentially like, you're going to lend me money, I'm going to pay you back with your own stupid money. So like, why are you going to even make payments? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and really the biggest reason lenders want to collect payments is because they want to make sure that you're still ticking away, you're still there, you're still doing something with the property. Because if you're not, they want to be able to foreclose on you and take the property back. And so because we weren't collecting payments, we had to find out some creative ways to figure out that they weren't dead, or something, that the project hadn't stalled. So we started building in these overlays where, if the project had stopped for 2 weeks at a time, we would foreclose on you because we wanted to make sure the project was always moving forward. If your insurance lapsed, that would be a foreclosure situation, and that happened a lot.
So the insurance, I want to talk about insurance too, but how did you know if their project hadn't moved along for 2 weeks? Like, you obviously couldn't be walking every house.
I would drive by them.
But we were talking, remember, like, it was based on draws, right? You had draws for a certain period of time.
Yeah.
And if you didn't request a draw, you're like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, exactly. And that would usually kind of spark it for me anyway. Yeah. If you weren't requesting draws, that meant your project probably wasn't moving. And so, I guess I don't want to foreclose. I didn't want to be like the owner of these properties. I wanted people to go through with them, finish the projects, make money, and move to the next one. That's how you keep your customers happy, right? But it was, you still need to kind of have that protection because you got to protect the money that's in place. So
like the dude that left the country and left the project for a month, right?
Yeah, there was a guy I did a loan on here in Riverside, actually, off of Magnolia and Van Buren over in that area. And yeah, the guy, we closed escrow and he took off to Korea for 2 months, and I'm expecting the project to be moving forward. It was actually a really ugly house. It needed a lot of work, and I was concerned he wouldn't be able to fit it into budget anyway, but he assured me up and down he could get it done and all this stuff. But when he takes off for 2 months, I'm like, what's going on with this project? I'm now looking at this thing I'm going to have to finish, so I ended up going to his house, and his daughter happened to be there, and she told me he'd gone to Korea, and I'm like, what? Who just goes to Korea right when they close on this deal, So he made all kinds of threats and everything, and told me he was going to murder me and all this great stuff, because I just wanted the project to move forward. I wanted him to make his money, but apparently he thought killing me was a better idea.
You know what? No, seriously, that legitimately happened. Like, I used to hang out in the office, like when I was doing acquisition for the funds, and I would stop in and Todd would tell me about the stuff, and I'm like, this is Looney Tunes. So I was going somewhere with this. Oh, so Jeff used to always say, right? So Todd's old partner used to always say that the worst day of the loan is the day after you write it, right? So in this case, that was the worst day was the day after you wrote that deal.
Yeah, the most risky position the lender is going to be in is the day the loan closes, because it still needs all that work done to the property. There's so many ifs at that point that could happen. So many things can go wrong. The market could crash, there could be an act of war, an act of God. You don't know what's going to happen. So that's the most risky day, is the day that you close escrow on the property for a lender. So the best way to work with a lender is to make them comfortable with that day. They're not worried about the project once it's done. Once the project's done, they'd love to foreclose on it at that point. They're getting a turnkey property they can sell and make a lot more back on than what they currently are owed on it.
Yeah, that's a really common. So the 65% ARV model, which most of you, most anyone who's talked to a hard money lender will have heard that same stupid phrase over and over again. And we constantly joke in the office about how, like, these guys do 65% of ARV because they've done it for 50 years and nobody has any idea why they do it.
Yeah, it's safe. If you're going to be a lender and you know nothing about it, just do that 65% program because it's safe. You're not going to lose money in that deal.
That's a loan to own.
Yeah.
So loan to own means I'm going to lend you money, and if you screw up, I'm taking your project back, and it's basically like I flipped it because I'm going to flip it and make money on your mistake.
Right. Yeah, 65% super safe. I mean, if you think about even in a down market, the market would have to tank 35%. In order for you to start losing money.
Yeah, I mean, and even because they use the 65 and then they do the holdback from there. I mean, you're just talking ultra conservative.
Exactly, and a lot of these lenders, they use the term skin in the game, and it was something that it still bothers me. I hate hearing skin in the game because, when you're a flipper and you're starving for a deal. I know there's a lot of people in the room right now that are starving for a deal, would love to be in one right now, and the reward is the money you're going to make on the back side of that deal. And that, for me, was skin in the game enough. I mean, I worked my butt off to get those deals. I didn't want to have to, put additional stuff into the deal. I'm having to put money in. Like, no, you're the money guy. Why am I putting money in? That's your job. My job is to find the deal and do the work. Your job is to put the money in. And that's always made sense to me, that the lender should be more of the money partner in the deal. And, my job is to find it and fix it up. So that's kind of the approach I took going into writing the initial loan program for Macmillan Capital, was that we wanted to be more of a money partner rather than, a lender. We didn't want to be their boss. We wanted to be their partner. So if something was going wrong, they'd feel comfortable coming to us and saying, hey, I'm running into this issue. Like, what can we do about this? That's what I would prefer to do, rather than the guy try to fix it himself and, just completely screw it up, which we've had happen.
So so when we started this conversation, so Todd and I were talking about this conversation yesterday and this morning, and I was sort of trying to figure out how to direct this, and I realized right now that's how we need to be directing this conversation. This conversation should be about the risk model that makes a lender of any sort, and hard money lender, license or not, right, family, friend, wherever you get the capital, their biggest concern is losing the money.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's and when we were lending with Rehab Loan Group, that was our biggest concern every day, was losing the money.
Yeah, of course.
Because we're gonna write checks this year for we haven't talked about it much, but like Todd and I are writing pretty big checks this year to investors on projects. Well, like just one project from Rehab Loan Group that we lost like $100,000 on. We're coming out of pocket now. Rehab Loan Group made money, and essentially it's just a matter of difference in net profit. But one borrower really made a bunch of huge mistakes,
yeah,
and the risk changed in the deal based on what our initial analysis.
Yeah.
So that's what we're all concerned about going in, right? Is managing risk. So when you're talking to a lender and they're talking about like why, underwriting guidelines and why they come up with these reasons for why your deal sucks, basically, like it's because they're trying to avoid writing a check because we're protecting our investors on the other side. Like, remember Merrill from Credit Sense?
Okay.
He was on top about respecting money, right?
Yeah, that's a big deal.
And so I've heard some people say phrases like, oh, it's called hard money because it's hard to earn, right? It's hard to earn, easy to lose. I've heard like variations of that. But I think Merrill, so this company Credit Sense, Todd and I think they're a good company. I mean, they basically help you walk through the credit repair process. Right? They basically make automated underwriting work for you so you can qualify for big lines. And he talked, and I wasn't in the seminar, Todd was, but Todd came back, was like, Merrill had a good idea. He was talking about respecting the money. And I thought that was such a great premise, was you need to respect the money that was given to you. Like that, somebody gave it to you, and you need to handle it with care and walk through the project. And at the end, give it back to them with their expectation. And if something goes sideways, you need to be like, oh, I screwed up. I'm doing everything I can to respect that money and give it back to you. So I think this conversation, that's what it needs to go to, is how do you talk to a lender? How do you put together capital to respect the money and make sure you give back the money that you borrowed?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing they're going to want to know is that you're good for it. When you're doing a hard money loan, it's not based upon your credit score. It's not based upon how much money you have in your checking account necessarily. It's going to be based more upon who you are as a person and your ability to repay that money, and what you're going to do in the event that something comes up, which it will. It's inevitable. Mm-hmm. Stuff happens. It's happened to us. Like Steve said, we've got a couple of deals we're dealing with right now that we're going to lose money on. That's the reality of the business. You don't always have a winner. So respecting that money is, by showing them that I will pay this back. I will do what I can to get this money back to you, because, that money's somebody's hard-earned money. It's their retirement account or something. It's who this money's coming from. So we have to respect it in the sense that you have to treat it better than your own money,
So we saw what the other side of that looks like, right? Mm-hmm. So at Rehab Loan Group, so after okay, talk about the transition from Macmillan to Rehab real quick, and then we'll talk about like what we saw when we started Rehab from the borrowers.
Okay, so with Macmillan Capital, it was all Jeff's money. He had a bunch of money he was putting out, but I had that money lent out within 3 months. Once I launched this program and brought it to a few people, it just kind of blew up. People wanted this program, and it worked out really, really well for them. So the money was out, and I couldn't get the loans paying off fast enough to be able to fund the new deals that are coming our way. So I was turning away a lot of money, a lot of deals, to the tune of about $13 million of loans, which, to give you an idea of how much I would have made, I probably could have bought a Rolls Royce with the money I would have made from those deals. So I was a little upset that I'm turning away so much deals, and so I said to Jeff, we should probably start putting together other people's money. I'm sure you have family and friends that would love to get in on this great venture that you're involved in. Like, you should talk to them. And he said, no, I just want to keep it small. I want to keep it my money, and that's it. And, we'll just quietly make a bunch of money over here, and that's all. And I'm like, I don't like that idea. So I was like, I'm going to start my own thing. So I basically incorporated Rehab Loan Group in 2013 and started the licensing process for myself so I could become a licensed lender, and wound down everything I had done for McMillan, helped him bring in a replacement for me, and then we kind of parted ways for a little bit. We're back in business together in another way now.
I forgot we borrowed from him for the first time in 2 years. Yeah,
we finally convinced him to get in on our other venture, which was flipping houses. It was funny. I mean, he was lending money, and we were just convincing him to lend it a little bit different way than he was doing it for the last few years. And he finally jumped in, so he'll be happy when that deal pays off. But sure. So we started Rehab Loan Group, and there was a few things I wanted to tweak, because with Macmillan Capital, the one thing that always kind of freaked me out was the loan documentation that we used. It was written by his attorney, who I told you before had never heard of a California finance lender before. And he didn't change any of his documentation. The same documents he was using for that, he was still using for residential mortgage loans, which, looking back, that documentation needs to be changed very seriously.
Which ironically, he eventually had a relationship with our same attorney, and then changed his documentation associated with it.
Yeah, so we ended up starting to look for other attorneys that could write up new loan documentation, and we met with Gerasi law firm out in Irvine, and they were familiar with California finance law and were able to produce a set of documents that's probably the most ridiculous set of documents I've ever seen.
86 pages?
80 some odd pages that Stephen and I sat down and combed through line by line.
Oh, and Ron helped us comb through the same set of documents.
Ron helped.
I think Ron found 2 or 3 errors. Was like, P.S. By the way, this is also wrong.
Ron said it's not called a driver's license; it's a driver license. I remember that one. That's one I remember.
Yeah, that was one of the corrections?
That was one of them. I remember that one specifically.
Touche.
Because I was like, you know what, Ron? I agree, because I know that too. And I'm like, I'm surprised I missed it.
And he's the only one who read the entire set of loan documents.
Yes, he did. So if you want somebody to read over your documents, I'm sure Ron would
Send
love
to Ron.
to volunteer.
Everybody should QC with Ron. He's got nothing better to do than sit in his office and read your documents.
He's like, please don't. No, but everybody helped us out reading through these things. But yeah,
I mean, it was a 4-hour conversation. Like, it was a whole afternoon on the phone with the attorneys trying to read through these documents. They were serious.
And I remember, as your attorney, their job is to protect you as much as they can as your client. So one thing we did not want on an asset-based loan to have personal guarantees against the borrower. I don't personally believe in them. I don't think on an asset-based loan, I kind of believe that the money person should share in the risk a little bit. They're earning interest for it.
We should explain okay. So every single hard money, private money note we get from somebody, if it says personal guarantee, we immediately say no and we cancel it out.
Yep. Yeah, because in the event anything happens, and the same risk goes for us. If an act of war, act of God, who knows what happens to the property or to that market. We don't want to be held personally liable for something that, completely was out of our hands. The lender's putting out money. There's a reason they're charging that high interest, way higher than a bank is charging, is because they're supposed to be taking on some risk. So we felt that personal guarantees were nonsense and shouldn't be in our documentation. So we fought with our attorneys for a while, and it ended up taking 13 pages out of those loan documents.
They were like they had to redact stuff all over the place. It came back to with this one central clause. It was intense.
And I remember they told us, but in the event that you foreclose on a property, don't you just want to bring the hammer down on these guys? And I'm like, I actually don't. No. I want to keep them as a client. And it's kind of a weird concept for them. Like, why would you want to keep somebody that lost on a deal? It's like, because it doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. You probably learned a lot from that. It makes you a better borrower when you've had a deal go south. I'd rather deal with somebody, honestly, at this point that's had some failures in the business rather than people who've only had successes, because they've learned a lot more of those hard lessons that, you don't learn until you have the lesson presented to you like that. So,
But
yeah, we wanted that out.
Do you remember the conversation though with them? Like, so the lesson I want to get out of that personal guarantee thing. It's funny. All these are going to come up as we're talking about this because I keep forgetting about these. It's been almost 5 years of this sort of transition from rehab loan group to now, and there's these like little lever points, right? These pivots that we went through, and one of them was in the personal guarantee. We kept saying over and over again that you shouldn't make a loan unless the project stands alone by itself without the person. If you find yourself as a borrower trying to convince a lender, or if you find yourself as a lender trying to convince yourself that the deal is okay because of the borrower, you fucked up. The deal has to stand by itself 100%. Every rehab loan group loan stood 100% by itself without the borrower. We walked the project and said, if this thing fails, we're going to step in and try and fix whatever this guy which we're still dealing with, like one last project if this person screws up.
That one was a little different because the guy screwed up in a way that
unexpected.
Unexpected. Yeah, he took a property that only needed a $50,000 rehab and took all the interior and exterior walls off and left just sticks.
It was a slab with 4 walls.
So
it was weird.
Yeah, and took the roof off. He did everything to this house to completely screw it.
I think we talked about it last month. For those of you who don't know, if 50% of your structure is gone or changed, the county requires 2017 building code, which completely changes your rehab. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, don't do it.
Don't do that.
No. So on a deal, we were supposed to make $3,000 total on as a lender. We're going to lose now roughly $45,000 on.
It's serious.
So it's it happens, and that's a lesson we learned. And there were some mistakes we had along that one where we probably could have stopped the bleed a little sooner, but we had faith in the guy.
Not much though.
Not much.
The difference between the first day we showed up and a week later was like 7 walls.
Yeah.
It was all framing.
Exactly.
It was like $6,000 in framing. Like the difference wasn't much.
Yeah. So, that's one of those cases where having somebody with experience would have been nice. But, another thing, too, is he felt like he wanted to solve the problem without us and wanted us to be so proud of the result.
Yeah.
But
and he didn't communicate with us.
He didn't communicate. Had he communicated, that would have
We
avoided
should have
it.
known when we pulled up and the guy had a Suzuki Brat with plastic geckos glued to the hood. That's when it was like the giant red flag. We're like, why does this guy have army men and plastic lizards glued to his hood? Morongo Valley Twackers contributed to that project.
Yeah, enjoy.
But that's what lenders worry about. So if you're in the room and you're looking to borrow, understand that that's what's going on in the back of the mind of a lender when you're saying, oh, just trust me, I got this. Like, yo, I had this project with geckos on a hood you haven't seen. And like, you need to see these things to understand what we're dealing with.
Yeah. It's when you're talking to the lender, that's the most scary point. And a lender is always going to be thinking, how am I going to lose money on this deal? So you have to be able to answer all those questions for them before they even have those questions. You already know how they're going to make money on it. And they know they're going to make money. They're not worried about that part of it. Their loan programs that they've set up will make them money. They're worried about how they're going to lose money because, like in our case, a $3,000 fee versus a $45,000 loss. How many deals do we have to do to make up for a $45,000 loss?
All of them.
Exactly. It's a good number of deals.
Yeah, it's significant. I mean, Rehab Loan Group made a decent multiple 6-figure income, right? But definitely not enough to make up for that level of risk.
Yeah, and so talking about the transition between going from Macmillan to rehab, like one thing I wanted to do was we wanted to eliminate that personal guarantee, because even if I was to sue this guy, let's assume that we sued this guy on this project in Morongo Valley. Yeah. If we sued him, he doesn't have anything. What am I going to get
because
from
he
him?
knows him.
Yeah, Andy knows him. What am I going to get from this guy? It's going to cause him all kinds of pain.
We're going to get
and
a great
anguish.
weed farm, though.
Yeah, exactly.
The Suzuki with the gecko.
I want the Army guy on front.
Yeah.
No, so what are we going to get out of it? It's you're already dealing with somebody that's not in a position to pay out anyway. Yeah. So what's the point? We're going to spend money on an attorney, and who makes money in all the lawsuits?
The attorneys.
Yeah,
100%.
So yeah, we said, what's the point? And I'm sure that's probably why they push the personal guarantee thing so much, is because you get into a lawsuit situation. That's where they make their money on those loan docs after they've already produced those loan docs
They
for
really
you.
do.
So,
Hold on. I want to note that part. So Robert Fergoso, for those who don't know him, he gave me really good advice the first time he spoke here 3 years ago. He said, if you can write a check for $20,000 to avoid a lawsuit, write the check. And I didn't understand what he meant, but trust me, that is the exact phrase you should echo in the back of your mind every time you're considering suing somebody. If you can write a check for $20,000 to avoid a lawsuit, write the check. What do you got, Andy?
Hey, if you're ever considering going to court, go online and download Beyond Thunderdome and watch the video and spin the wheel
Totally.
and understand that is a real situation.
100%. It,
The black dress spins the wheel and Lord knows where it's
you know, if the wheel of death is exactly how a lawsuit goes, trust me, there's absolutely no way to predict the outcome. Just write the check for a small amount of money and move on.
yeah. So anyway, we took that out. And the other thing we changed was we changed our fee and we upped our leverage, because now we have another lender that's doing 76%. We got to up them. So we did 80% ARV, which was the most aggressive, and to this day would be the most aggressive program in the entire country.
But we should talk about how we hedged that, though. That was important. It was hedged very well.
Yeah, because we had investors on the other side of us. It wasn't our money we were putting out there. Yeah, we had some money we were putting out in the very beginning, but we had to get other people to contribute to this program. And it was tough. We had a really, really hard time convincing people to put money into this never, ever tested program. And yeah, certainly all the institutional organizations, all the funds, all the banks and all that stuff, you know, they laughed us out of town. A couple of them tried to work with us a little bit to make something happen, but ultimately what it was going to be was the exact same program everybody else has. Once we modeled it out, you know, we ran so many different spreadsheet scenarios.
We're really good at those now.
We're extremely good at Excel at this point. And they, yeah, it's funny how they all worked out to be exactly the same thing that everybody else was already offering. So, you know, we said, you know, this isn't the program we want, and we walked away from them. We sure showed them. But
I mean, like we got a bunch of. You remember that you can't take less than $10 million offers,
yeah,
and then like those all turned into like, well, we'll give you $10 million with credit checks and appraisals and nonsense and whatever. And we're like, well, why do we even have this conversation?
exactly.
They all want the same thing.
They all want the same thing. So we had a hard time. So we ended up kind of reaching out to a high net worth individual type group of people. You know, we met a lot of people at these different investment clubs that had capital they wanted to put to work, and some people were cowboys and they were willing to put it to work in a revolutionary program. You know, so we got a few people to come on board, and you know, the deals went pretty good. We had actually quite a few really good deals go out in the very beginning. We didn't really have a bad deal until that Morongo Valley one. And that was, to this day, the only bad deal that we wrote.
We had another one we wrote a $9,000 check on, but only because the interest term, and the deal wasn't even bad because I would have owned that one at the end. If
one
we
in
had to
Big Bear?
refi that and keep it, I would have kept it.
Yeah, there
It
was one
a
we
good
did
deal.
in Big Bear. Certain people in the room might remember that deal. That it was. It wasn't
we
too
wrote
bad.
a check for the gap in interest, and it is what it is. But I mean, like the rest of them went very, very well and paid in full, and everybody got really huge returns on their investment. But I think the thing that made that program so successful, right? It had such a low default rate was we showed up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was like, so for those of you wondering, if you're going to borrow money, some of these lenders, like let's take Anchor for example. Anchor is a big company, and Anchor is a pretty aggressive company. Like they write a lot of loans.
Yeah.
And they can't have reps in the field all day long. So no matter how much you convince a company like them that you're going to do the right thing, they can't possibly supervise you the way Todd and I would supervise these projects, because we had our own experience, right? So we were showing up, and it was essentially a joint venture, but we didn't make as much money. And we realized that a couple of years in, we're like, we shouldn't do this anymore. We should joint venture, because we were doing 90% of the project for these people. And like a large company, they don't have guys in the field that can meet you every week. So you're trying to convince them that that they should lend you the money, and they're like, we can't supervise you. So you're trying to sort of mitigate their worry that they can't supervise you.
Right. Yeah, and that's where collecting payments is basically their way of keeping
Yeah.
track of you. And they don't, nothing gets sparked for them to do anything other than what they're doing, which is collecting payments. Nothing gets sparked unless you stop making those payments. Then they're like, hey, wait, what's going on with this property over here?
Joe over here stopped paying us back with our own money. What happened?
Yeah, and the same thing goes for big banks. You never hear anybody talk about it, but in fact, somebody tonight asked me about the due on sale clause that's written into a traditional mortgage for like if you're going to do a subject to type of deal. And, the funny thing is that these banks, they're even bigger than these hard money lenders are. They have, tens of thousands, if not, hundreds of thousands of loans out there. They don't have time to sit there and check up on deals all the time to see if the name on title matches the name on their loan docs. They're never going to check it. And if they do, as long as the payments are coming in, they're not going to do anything about it. It's extremely unlikely that due on sale clause is going to get enacted because of a change of title. As long as they're getting their payments, they don't seem to really mind. Not to say you should go out and do it. Take what I'm saying with a grain of salt because they still have that right. So they could catch you, and they could still, go for the due on sale clause.
Because it happens every day.
Yeah, it happens.
It never happens, but
There was a guy I know in Texas. He had like 2,000 subject twos.
Yeah.
And it happened to him
like once.
once.
Yeah, exactly.
So it can happen. So don't go out there and say, "Oh, Todd told me to do this."
So let's pretend that you actually have borrowed money, you respect the money, you understand the leverage position of the lender, you do everything you can to make them comfortable, and somebody says yes, but you don't have any of your own money to fill that gap. And Todd and I have come up with 10,000 creative ways to fill the gap between what a lender will lend you and what the total project cost is. But 90% of you in this room, your first inclination is going to be to borrow the secondary piece, the gap fund, right, from another person. Now, I hate gap funding because I've lost investor money with gap funds myself back in the last cycle. However, there are an exceptionally high number of people who will take that risk, right? Mm-hmm. Who want to make a 20% return on their money or 50% of your profits or whatever, and will lend you gap fund money because they feel like they can mitigate the risk of the project.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know what gap funding is essentially if you have to make payments and the remaining portion of the purchase price on a property, somebody gives you the money in a second position loan behind a first position loan to continue to flip the property or to buy a rental or to whatever the case may be. So since we've talked tens of thousands of times about gap funding, what do you think I'm looking for you to spark my mind. Like, what do you think the strategy is to ask for gap fund money if you don't have it yourself? Because everybody's like, oh, it's great, hard money, whatever, but I don't have the $30,000 left to complete this deal. So what do you think? How do you think you would keep somebody safe with gap fund money?
There's a lot of people that want to get into real estate. And there's a lot of people that want to get into real estate that have about $50,000. I don't know why 50,000 is the magic number, but a lot of people have
all of them.
A lot of people have 50 grand sitting around somewhere in some account, and this is what they're going to start their investing business with. And so, finding deals is tough. There's a lot of people in this room I know that have told me they can't find deals. So, when somebody finds a deal, the funding is the next thing that they're going for. So, anybody with a good enough deal can get a hard money loan. But in reality, because Rehab Loan Group doesn't have this cool program anymore that we used to have, but
investors wouldn't give us the money.
Investors wouldn't give us enough money, and we kind of stopped trying to find it.
Yeah.
We wanted to move back into flipping, and it's been fun. But we have plenty of people that want to do deals. So the joint venture model is great. It's a great way to do it, and I think the best way for a person bringing in gap funding to do it, instead of doing it as a loan, do it as an actual equity piece. Mm-hmm. Consider yourself as, if you're putting in the money to bring in that deal, you're filling a gap that person needed. So it's worth, to me, a third of the profit.
I agree.
If somebody's going to bring in that gap, let's just say the hard money lender is going to put in the 65%, and they're going to cover rehab, because a lot of the loan programs now, they have these hybrids where they'll do like 90% of your purchase price and 100% of your rehab is how a lot of them are structured now. This idea didn't even exist like 6 years ago.
I mean, that's like so with Ryan picking up Rehab Loan Group, mm-hmm. right? that's, I mean, that's most of the product that's being pushed out, like he's seen across his desk, right?
Yeah, that's how it is now. It's, people are doing 90% of purchase, 100% of rehab. They keep the money in a fund control. It seems that they've loosened up a lot of the guidelines for releasing funds out of the
It's
fund
like
control.
Photos and
Yeah, a lot of them are taking photos. They're not requiring the inspector to go out and inspect, although some do. It really depends on the scope of the project.
Yeah.
But they've loosened up. Some of them are using online platforms, something that we tried to build ourselves, but that was a very cumbersome piece of software we were trying to
It was
build.
only 3 times. I mean, Jesus,
Yeah.
the 4th time has been an interesting experience.
It's amazing because I'm kind of a computer nerd myself. So when I was working Macmillan Capital, I actually built an online platform so that Jeff and I could keep communication about every deal we did. I built this thing on my own using a program called Sugar CRM, which I'm still kind of amazed I even built this thing, but it was only like 90% of what I needed it to be, and like the other 10% needed somebody that really knew what they're doing with a computer.
I like how you say that though, but like I would talk to you at midnight and you'd be in the office building the stupid thing.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry, I told Megan I couldn't be home till midnight because I had to spend 15 hours today building this. It took you a long time.
It took me a really long time, and it turned out to be like 90% of what I needed it to be. And I told myself I was going to build a better platform, with Rehab Loan Group.
Yeah.
We were going to build this online thing where the borrower would interact with it, the investor would interact with it, and we'd interact with it. And it would be this online place where, all the deals that we were involved in were all handled in one central location. And man, that is tough to do. Just to get it to that one last little piece where everything seems to work right.
Yeah.
That takes like 6 months to work. And man, we did not get there. We got really close.
We got to 90% of it.
Yeah, we got to 90% of the 99% of it.
90% of it. Right?
So it was tough. So that was what my dream was. I always had this thing to build out this program to make it simple and have a central place for it. I don't know where I was going with that, but it was a fun story.
Well, I mean, I guess I would say it's a segue, but the truth, or a side, like a what do you call it? Like
A side
thing?
thing?
Side route?
Yeah.
But the truth is like
Tangent. There you go.
Thank you. The
Math teacher?
The teacher gives us the tangent. Yeah, math teacher, right? So,
Sine, cosine, tangent.
but I mean, now seriously, this is the logic. What you're hearing right now is the logic of a lender. Like, so, I mean, Todd and I and Billy, who's not here, I don't think.
He was.
He was?
I saw him.
Oh, I didn't see him.
He was talking to Laura earlier.
He left?
He's out in the hallway.
He's in the hallway? So we spend like 15 hours a day. So like what we're trying to convey to you, and we should actually open this up for questions. What we're trying to convey to you is we spent 15 hours a day from, I remember it was May, from May to December, trying to put together this hard money company. And so we built a hard money company from the ground up, raised the money, got the loan docs. And I don't mean like fit some cookie cutter bullshit. I mean, we actually built a revolutionary product that people had never seen and lent a lot of money doing it. And we looked at borrowers and risk and risk mitigation and documentation and the stuff like, and we were like, you would come across our desk and we were trying to size you up, right? Like if you're sitting here wondering like why, like what a lender is looking at, and I say a lender, not a broker, because brokers are a different animal. Those people don't give a shit about your project. But if you're talking the actual lender, we were trying to create sort of a bulletproof underwriting model. And we spent a lot of time and talked to a lot of people and got a lot of feedback to build this. And so what we're trying to convey is like what the psychology is of a lender that you're asking to give you money. And I hear a lot of people, if you're new especially, come to this meeting and say, oh yeah, bullshit, it's so easy. Yeah, I'm sure you got a deal. The money shows up. No, seriously, it does. But if you have either one, a partner, right, like somebody who could put up the gap fund money, or two, the psychological understanding of a human being trying to mitigate losing money, you're going to get your deal funded. So what I wanted to convey with this meeting, and why I wanted just to have a discourse with Todd, is that there's this like really serious fear of a lender of losing capital, and I'm hoping that when we get to the end of this, like you have a better understanding of like what a lender is thinking about when you're sitting in front of them. I don't give a shit if you understand the programs, if you know like the documentation. What I want you to think is you're staring at this person and they're looking at you going, please, for the love of God, don't lose my money.
Yeah,
And like you need to understand what their thought process is before you ask them.
definitely. Yeah, it's, like I said before, everything they're going to want to know from you is how you're going to screw them and how they're going to lose money on this deal. I can't tell you how many of them are like terrified that you're going to take all of the money. I don't know how this is even
100%
happening.
of it.
Yeah, 100% of it. You're going to run down to Mexico with your, with your $200,000.
That's a common question. Like I give a shit to leave. Like I have. Oh, don't worry about the $10 million having a fund. I'm going to take your $200,000 and leave with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's going to last a week.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
a lot of cocaine and hookers. Like for like 7 days. That's all I got.
So it was always funny to hear them, say that. But a lot of the lenders that I've come across in over the years, they didn't share the same philosophy with me. Like most lenders will say yes or no. My whole philosophy was it's never a no. It's just this is what we can do. So the best I can do is my best offer, and I'm not going to put out some. I always hated these guys. They'd like throw out an offer to see if you take it. Oh, we'll say 4 points. Like no, just make me your best offer up front. And that's what we always would aim to do is make our best offer. Like we weren't really. There was no negotiation after that point. It's like this is the best we could do. If you don't like it, then we can't. We're not going to do the deal. So it wasn't that we were trying to be tough. It's just that was the best we could do. We never tried to, get a little bit here or there, from anybody. So it was, we tried to be a very different lender. We also did away with fees, because fees to me,
sucked.
that was the biggest sticker shock to me working with any lender. Were these fees that I didn't even know about? They weren't advertised anywhere. They never talked about them. It just showed up on the estimated closing statement right before I'm about to close escrow, and it's like now, it's too late for me to like negotiate with the lender at this point. Like everybody's expecting to close. I'm not going to be like, hey, what's this? $2,800 in fees.
You didn't tell me about this. Oh, it was on the form you signed. There was 19 pages long. You didn't read it on line 17.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was always one thing that was really annoying to me with those fees. So we did away with them. We got rid of even like the wire fee, which was like $25. Like we even took that out. We took every fee out and just included everything. And so that's one thing we tried to do was we tried to like really start a revolution in the lending industry
That nobody paid attention to.
Yeah, that nobody cared about. We were those guys.
Well, that's why I keep trying to do this weird thing, right? The thing that something different than all the other clubs, right? So Todd and I, we spent our, not to get nostalgic, but we spent our childhood like dreaming about the idea of building a company like In-N-Out. We wanted to build a company that paid our employees more, right? Is that Tyler laughing like a child in the hallway?
Nope.
No, it's not.
Wow.
Oh my God, it's not Tyler this time. Who's outside? Usually it's you.
Wow.
Wow. Hey, was I wrong in asking?
No, you
Did
weren't.
you think it was Tyler also?
I actually didn't think that was
Okay.
Tyler.
So who's out there?
Tyler has.
It's Patrick?
It was Patrick.
What a dick, Patrick.
No.
No, but like, so
Tyler's laugh is much more charming.
it's like donkey, but like
Yeah.
more charming. So he's wearing the waffle shirt too. He's got
There
the
he
blue
is.
on. So I can hear you in here, sir.
What?
You were not getting Matt
Hold
drunk.
on. Meeting's over. Okay.
Oh shit. Okay. So, but okay. Before I end this meeting, I want to make so Todd and I, we always wanted to build like a company. The idea was that you would pay your employees more to get more benefits, right? The client would benefit. That was the idea. I got to tell you, if you're talking to a hard money lender right now, that is not their goal. So you need to understand that if you're talking to somebody to borrow money, their entire goal is to feed the fund or the individual that gave you money or gave them money. So I mean, I don't want to be like, hey, we're awesome because we gave a shit, but we did. And every investor freaked out about the idea. So we're like, yeah, we're going to move on to something else that makes more money. But when you're talking to a hard money lender, keep in mind that they give two shits about you, and all they care about is paying their investors. They 90% of them do not care. Just know that you need to look at points, fees, what your expected time of completion is, and it's a contract, right? Well, we said the same thing with Rehab Loan Group.
Yeah.
It's a contract, and if you don't complete it by the end of the contract, the results of not completing the contract are in the contract. That's it. It's not emotional. It's really simple. If you're borrowing money, it's just a contract.
Yep. So we were also kind of touching on seconds and people wanted to put in gap funding.
Wait, where are you gonna feel like it? You got another idea?
Well, I was saying that the person that putting in the gap funding should be entitled to a third of the profit.
Yeah.
But the important thing for people that are in a gap situation is for them to understand the risk of what they're getting into. And this is what Steve's fear associated with seconds and with
100%. I'm afraid of that.
Yeah, he hates the idea of it because he lost investor capital in the downturn. The market tanked, as you all know, in 2008. Steve was holding some property at that time. He lost those investors' money. That money went away.
It was like 60 grand, but it was still more than I wanted to lose. Like, it was scary. I had explained to other people that I lost their money, and like I bailed most of them out through loans, but that shit stays with you.
And but on the other side too, was it Steven's fault the market crashed? Absolutely not. He was a very, very small fish in a very, very large pond. That was as part of a big ocean of things that were going on. He was just a tiny grain of sand at that time. So, was it his fault? No, not at all. He takes that. He still carries the guilt, associated with
totally,
it.
100%.
But had he at that time prefaced those investors with, "Hey, the market's crazy right now. There's a chance this thing could crash." Yeah, there's a chance. Had he at least, exactly. It's always up from here. No, if he had prefaced it and sort of guided their expectations to at least understand that there's a potential for loss, it would have been a much more different scenario for him in 2008, 2009. He wouldn't have the guilt today because they're getting into understanding the risk associated with it.
Well, that's the blind. So I guess we're both trying to get the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I would get out with that is, we use a lot of our relationships to borrow money, right? Like, I like you, you like me, give me some money. That's really how it goes. Like, if anybody in this room has given us money or anybody else money, and they think that like they know all the ins and outs of everybody's daily life, you're fucking retarded. Like, it's absolutely not true. Like, everybody has crazy shit that happens every day in their life. You're taking a risk no matter what you do. We pay high returns, and so does everybody else, because you're taking a risk. But you, as an investor, if you're getting into a project, are saying, I believe one of two things. I believe that the market is this, or the project, if it goes sideways, is this. That's it. And if you're going to use a relationship to borrow money, the conversation needs to be prefaced with, I want to borrow money for this. This is my belief as to how the project's going to go. You do your due diligence, and you take a risk based on your return, and say, this is my expected return based on the risk. And if everything goes to complete crap tomorrow because, I don't know, a comet hits California, like, that's your risk. And yeah, if I had known to say that, right, if I had understood that in 2006 when I borrowed money, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But the way I looked at it was, yeah, it's gonna be amazing. Like, I'm a genius. We're gonna flip houses. Let's go. And it was the stupidest thing I could have done at the time, because I had one great project and the next one's went sideways. And he's gonna be like, why are you flipping houses?
No, I have a disagreement. Even if you had told those people those things, I doubt you would have said, hey, you lost, I told you if I had. I think you still would have been.
Yeah, that's because that's who he is.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. But I went 100% broke sideways with that market, lost 7 figures in property. I couldn't make anybody whole, and I couldn't even pay my rent, right, or my mortgage. Like, but I get where you're coming from. I guess what Todd's getting at, what I'm trying to get at is, the deal should be prefaced with the risk, not with the relationship.
Right.
It's about the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So should we open up to some questions?
No, Patrick's getting Matt drunk. I thought we were. What? You bought.
thank you.
For those you don't know, Patrick. Matt, are you drinking? Matt was or is leaving recovering Mormon,
recovering
and
Mormon.
he's like, and he doesn't drink at all. He's like never drank, and now I'm just excited to go deal with this. Yeah, I'm
Deal
on
with.
board. Okay, so we should take some questions.
We should take
though.
some questions.
Yeah.
Any questions? We got one up front.
That's my first time, so when you speak, you sound like you don't loan anymore to people, or?
Yeah,
So-
I mean, you are.
So yeah, Rehab Loan Group is still in existence. We still loan. All the lending is now currently through Ryan Raven. Is he still in here, Ryan? He's in the back there. There he
Right.
is. Yeah, so Ryan handles all the lending for Rehab Loan Group. He is the chief loan officer for Rehab Loan Group. Our programs we offer are the best in the business. We have the best programs available currently. They're not our own programs. These are programs we broker from other people that have these programs. That's how we kind of evolved, was into that sort of a thing. So, yes, we still lend.
Well, essentially, you're auditing other people's programs to see if decide if they're shit or not, and saying yes, you should borrow this money.
Yeah, exactly. And,
Yeah.
we do one more than most brokers do. We actually look at the deal and tell you if it's worth pursuing or not. We're not just going to submit every single thing you send to us and waste everybody's time. We're going to tell you if it's a good deal or not. So there's still a very high customer service level to what we do. But I'm not personally involved much in the lending side. That's all Ryan. So Ryan's the guy you got to talk to about the lending side of things.
Anybody else? What do you got, Andy?
Have you ever heard of a good deal that couldn't be funded?
Have I ever heard of a good deal that could not be funded? I guess it would be the deal that was never presented to somebody.
Yeah, if you kept it in your back pocket, nobody ever heard about it. Like deals that are good, they get run with.
Yeah, I heard about actually. There's somebody in the room I talked to in the break. Shannon, I believe, was her name. She told me about 2 deals that she had that she didn't do anything with.
What a
And
bummer.
That's something
I
that
got
happened.
one
You know
side.
what? I've done it too. There was a house. There was actually an empty lot, like from our office, which is right here on the corner. I would drive down 5th Street going home, and there was always this empty lot I would drive by. It was empty. I would see it every single day driving home from work. And, one day I see a for sale sign in this empty piece of dirt in this little neighborhood. I've driven by this thing every day. And every day I drive by, I'm like, I could put a cool house there every single day. Eventually that for sale sign was gone. And then I start seeing footings getting poured, and I'm like, oh, somebody bought that piece of dirt. They're building a house there. And sure enough, there's now a house there. It's a really nice house. It's pretty much exactly what I was going to do. It's just like, for me, I'm like, that's the deal I drive by every single day. There's another one I drive by every single day also. It's just coming from my house to here.
Oh, the fire one?
Yeah, the one that
Yeah.
was fire damaged. They haven't done anything to this house for like 5
He's
years.
got 6 houses.
The guy owns 6 houses.
Yeah.
I've contacted this guy. I've at least made an effort here, but I just haven't called him enough yet.
We
But
haven't called him in a year, though.
I haven't called him in exactly a year.
Yeah.
But I've given his number to like 6 people, and nobody's been able to do anything with it. So,
I don't know, I'm going to drive to his ex-wife's house. I bet you can get hold of him.
yeah, exactly.
We know his ex-wife lives, and like she still talks to him, and she lives in one of his houses. We should go to her house.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So the address is 123 Main Street. No, no, I don't know the address off the top of my
Yeah.
head, but I know exactly where
But
it is.
he owns like 6 in the Rubidoux area, and like Todd and I both went and met with him one day. There's
Yeah.
a rocket ship in the backyard. It's for those of you going which I heard, which is there's a rocket ship playground set in the backyard, and I was like, can I get the rocket ship and a stock car?
Yeah.
The rocket ship.
exactly.
It's those old like. You know those gnarly jungle gyms that are like made out of like steel tubing that kids died on? Those are the best ones. Like the ones we had actual fun on. He's got one in the backyard, and I was like, can I have that? I was excited.
So, yeah, I experience these things all the time. It are the deals that I don't do. Any other questions?
Any other questions before we break in? What do you got,
Patrick, up front here.
Documentation would you use? So, for instance, I'm going to Mexico, and so there's we have an external lawyer outside.
All right, so you go to Mexico, you have a lawyer.
High probability of it's risky.
Yep, it's risky. You also are a citizen. A piece of toilet paper, because that's honestly what matters. No. In all seriousness, like I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I had some technical knowledge for this
Okay,
one.
Todd does have some technical knowledge, and we can let Todd answer the question. But before Todd gives you technical knowledge, the deal by itself, right? Like has to have a decent yield to take the risk, right? Like so the paperwork associated with it. I mean, when you cross the international lines, which we haven't, have we dealt with anything associated with that?
Well, so I guess the simple answer to this would be if the money's coming from the United States
Yeah.
and coming from specifically California or something, you're based in California, you can invest that money outside of the country.
Yeah.
The entity that's collecting this money can invest outside of the country as long as that's what's written in your private placement memorandum and everything. So if you're putting the fund together here, it can invest wherever it wants. You just have to make sure you're not breaking any, international.
You see, you
codes.
text me because some personal knowledge. Like Patrick texted me and he sent me like a section on it, which I didn't reply to because it was like 10 o'clock at night, and I was like, I'm not answering all these questions at 10 o'clock at night. I was like, I'll read this later. Well, it was after my class, wasn't it, on Saturday? Was it right before? Oh yeah. But so he wanted to do like a fund model, like a small fund model.
Yeah.
And like, so the reason Todd brought up like fund models is because if you're borrowing money here, you're responsible for it here. Anything outside the U.S. doesn't really matter at all. Like you're borrowing the money here and you're guaranteeing it here with whatever you're guaranteeing it with, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, really the paperwork is just U.S. paperwork. You're just saying it's going to this place.
Yeah. Obviously, everything you put together in Mexico is going to have to be, it's going to have to comply with their, regulations. And I am not familiar with any regulations set in Mexico.
How many hectares is it? Like, I have no idea
Yeah.
what you're dealing with.
So, but yeah, like you told me before, you have an attorney down there that's, already fixed up.
And then the big four firms have international compliance attorneys.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, if you get hooked up with like one of the big four accounting
I
firms.
bet you we know
KPMG
somebody.
or
Yeah,
something.
I bet you we know somebody at KPMG that could probably introduce you to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
No, we actually have a friend at KPMG who's on the tax side, but she probably knows somebody really, really good there.
Yeah. Any other questions? Lending. Super exciting
Yeah, I know.
stuff
All right,
to talk about.
we should get out of here then.
All right. Should we just, move on to next month?
Yep.
Well, cool. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.